it starts at number one with you as a coach doing it. Like, don't, in my opinion, I would never, like tell my kids to do something that I'm not willing to do myself or that I'm not already doing myself. So number one, it starts with you. Number two, let's bring it down to the captains, to the leaders, get them on board. And then it kind of will just trickle through the whole team.
Welcome to the Cutting Edge Coaching Podcast, where we believe coaches are some of the most important teachers and leaders in the world, and they deserve to be supported. I'm your host, Luke Gromer, and every week we're bringing you conversations with coaches, experts, and leaders from across sports that will give you practical ideas and strategies that you can apply in your coaching to develop high-performing teams and high-character people. Coaches, I'm excited to welcome Shay Haddow to the podcast. Shay is a coach and speaker on confidence and mental performance for female athletes, as well as the host of the Alpha Girl Confidence podcast and author of She the Confident. Her mission is to empower girl athletes to build unshakable confidence and emotional resilience so they can live and play to their fullest potential. In this conversation, we talk about helping athletes navigate mistakes, mental health and resilience, helping athletes build growth mindsets, helping athletes break out of slumps, and more. If you enjoyed this episode and want to grab a copy of the free podcast notes, just go to cuttingedgecoach.com/podcast or click the link in the show details to download a free PDF of notes from this episode or any episode of the podcast. And coaches, I'm excited to announce a new online workshop I'm hosting with Doug Lemov, Film for Coaches. It's a 90-minute interactive online workshop where we're going to dive deep into how to use film effectively to increase the learning and development of your players and teams. The workshop will include presentations, video examples of film sessions, a Q&A, and more. Spots are limited, so go to filmforcoaches.com or click the link in the show details to learn more or register before it fills up. Now to my conversation with Shay Haddow. Enjoy the episode. Coaches, excited to welcome Shay Haddow to the podcast today. Shay, I want to start off and talk about how as coaches we can focus on improving our athletes' mental health and the impact of that on decreasing anxiety and helping them build emotional resilience, both in sport and in life.
Yeah, this is actually my favorite topic right now. Not only because at the time we're recording this, it's been a big topic that I'm talking about with my audience, but also, as you know, probably know, Luke, there's been a lot of, college athletes in the news recently over the last year who have died by suicide. And, mental health has been kind of at the forefront of our minds. And it's an awesome topic, like I said, that I love talking about, that coaches and parents can have a huge impact on, right? I think it's important for us as adults, as coaches, as leaders, as parents, to be the ones to let kids know that, like, it's okay to not be okay, to let them know that, like, the pressures that they're dealing with are normal, to let them know that they're not alone. It's really huge because when I was an athlete, I massively struggle with anxiety on the field, on the court, and just in my daily life. And I didn't really have anyone to talk to about it. I didn't have, my parents didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it was. My coaches, I didn't talk to my coaches or my teammates or anything like that. So I think it would have been so huge for me as a youth athlete and now as a coach to be able to have a coach or just an adult figure to be able to talk to and be like, hey, you know what? I'm really struggling. And so I think the most important thing that coaches can do is let their players know that, like, hey, I'm open. Like, you can literally come and talk to me about anything. I care about you. I care more about you as a person and your mental health than I do about your performance and how many goals you score, how many points you score, any of that stuff. And just really opening up the door of this open communication, human first, athlete second, I think is huge.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that stood out to me in what you were just talking about. The first is the importance of just normalizing the emotion
Yeah.
and expressing that, hey, it's totally normal that, one, especially within the sport context, you feel anxiety around performance and struggle. And then two, that's also just a normal part of life outside of sport too. And recognizing that just because an athlete comes into your gym or onto your field doesn't mean that they drop and leave the other things in their life that may be weighing on them, positively or negatively. And then I think what you said there at the end is really important too, is just to remember and stress that it is first and foremost about the person before the player. I think that's huge, and I think most coaches that are listening to this would probably adhere to that philosophy already. But I think it's just a really powerful reminder. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you mentioned as far as on your own journey when you were an athlete. You didn't really have coaches that were equipped in this area, and you talked about you struggle with a lot of anxiety, yeah, in your sport experience. So, would you talk about a little bit more about what that was like, and maybe like what was the impact of it? Maybe both athletically and then outside of that as well.
Yeah, and it's not that maybe that they weren't equipped. I just think at that time it wasn't something that was really talked about like it's talked about now, right? So maybe they were equipped. Maybe if I would have came to them, it would have been different. But yeah, as far as how it affected me. I'm going to go off the field first. So socially, I really held back from doing a lot of things with my friends because I was scared of having a panic attack, in public. And I really missed out on a lot of opportunities in school. And this, I'm telling you, Luke, like it started when I was like 5 years old. So it's gone my whole life. So from elementary, middle school, high school, it got better in college and it's been up and down. But it definitely affected me in terms of like just doing things, traveling, like going out and doing things that I wanted to do. But my anxiety was like, no, you need to like stay here, stay home, stuff like that. And then on the field, it was more so before games. Like before games, I just would dread the lead up to games because I would get so nervous. I always call it the pregame poops, where you have to your stomach's so nervous and you have to just go to the bathroom. I'm always looking for the bathroom as soon as I got to the field. And I was never excited for games because I was always so nervous. I was always so nervous about, making mistakes and what are my coaches going to think of me? What are the other parents or players going to think of me? Am I going to get benched? Am I going to get playing time? So it's just this never ending kind of like thinking before games about what's going to go wrong. And then after games, constantly thinking and being anxious about, what all the things that didn't go wrong. I could never see the things that went right. I could only see the things that went wrong. And that kind of, bled into the next game. But yeah, it's definitely been something that I would say I'm a kind of a pro in anxiety because I've dealt with it for so long. And that's why I love talking about it because I know especially now there's so many kids, especially post COVID, that have struggled with anxiety, whether it's in the classroom with their friends or in their sports. So yeah, I'm glad we're talking about it.
Absolutely, yeah, it's a reality, and I think if we're ignoring it as coaches, then we're not, yeah, doing the job that we should be doing, and I think we're just going to miss opportunities to make that impact on athletes' lives that I believe most of us want to make. I'm really curious. I know that you spent a lot of time coaching soccer specifically, and now you have transitioned into, um, yeah, being a mental coach essentially for primarily junior high, high school girls. I'm curious though, what do you think as coaches we can actually do to help athletes when they are experiencing the kinds of kind of thought thought patterns that you were just talking about that you
Mm.
experienced as an athlete? How do we help athletes change those narratives and stories that are often going through their mind around, oh my gosh, what if I make a mistake here? What is my coach thinking? All those different narratives and stories that can kind of, yeah, as coaches, it can do it to us too, but especially our athletes, our young athletes can kind of take over their mind and really actually impact their performance and their well being. What are some things we can do as coaches to help them navigate that?
Yeah, I'm actually working with a high school team, or I just finished working with a high school team right now. And that was one of the first things we talked about on our call because the reality is, with girl teams specifically, I would say at least 75% of your team is probably dealing with some of these nervous, anxious thoughts, these thoughts of like, what if I make a mistake, kind of all these things going through their head. And so that it's something you can do as a whole team. Like it's not something that you have to go to each player, and you can do that by all means, you can do that, but that's going to be very difficult. But it's something you could do pregame as a whole group. So one thing that I love to kind of do to get like the negative thoughts out and let's replace them is what I call positive what ifs. So usually we have all these negative, what if I make a mistake? What if I get benched? What if I make a fool of myself? And it's just all these negative things, right? But the positive what ifs, it's just replacing them with what if I have a great game? What if I play with confidence? What if I score a goal? What if I, get awesome playing time? Like replacing that with positives and generally focusing on what if, filling in the blank with something you can control more so than like the outcome. It can be outcome based, but more so I'd focus more on the process. So doing that like as individuals, as teams, even, it's a really cool idea. Maybe you get your team into partnerships and they can go back and forth and kind of, what if, and then the other person goes, what if, and they just bounce ideas back and forth. And it really can get the negativity out, the like the nervousness, the contraction, and instead we're now expanded, we're now excited, we're more thinking in positive possibility as opposed to, oh my gosh, what's going to happen. So that's one thing. And then leading into that, another big thing is like visualizing or breathing, right? So you can kind of couple the breathing exercises with the visualization, but using the what if. So let's take the what ifs that your players just said, and now they can visualize those things actually happening. And for me, visualization was the thing in college that completely transformed my junior year from my senior year. I would give 100% credit to visualizing. That got me, number one, got me out of these anxious thoughts, but just totally transformed my confidence and my performance on the field. So those are two things that I would suggest coaches do, with their players, whether it's a high school coach, you do it on the way to the game on the bus, or you do it right when you guys arrive to the field. But it's something that's really powerful when done individually, but also as a team.
Yeah, I like both of those. I really like the positive what ifs because, like you said, usually those unhelpful narratives and stories in our minds start with some sort of what if. What if
Yeah.
something negative happens? And just flipping it. Oh, wow. What if something great happens? What if I show up and I play this way today? Or what if I show up and I do this today? I think that's really powerful. One of the things that just came to my mind, I'm curious, maybe in your experience, coaching small groups of girls and or coaching specific teams, if you've encountered this and how you've dealt with it. When I think back to my time as an athlete in high school, I had a coach that tried to do some of these things, and I remember myself and some of the other high school boys that thought we were too cool, like kind of poo-pooing it,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
what is this? So I guess my question is, how do you deal with that when as a coach, as adults, like we recognize, all right, this is legitimately valuable. This can be really helpful. How do we overcome some of those objections or, yeah, maybe just the perspective that the people that we're actually trying to encourage to do it have towards things around mental well-being, mental health, mental performance?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good question because it's so true. Like so many times, whether it's like I talk about meditation a lot, and of course, a lot of teenagers are like, I don't want to meditate, like that's no fun, or visualization, or whatever it is. So I think number one, it's for me like how I do it as a coach because same thing happens to me is I'll share how it's personally helped me in my story. So I talk about again what I already mentioned was how it totally changed how I played in college. And then even bringing in like, oh, here's what LeBron James does, or here's what, Mia Hamm did, or like whatever it is, kind of bringing in these pro athletes. Cause the reality is most of these pro athletes are doing these kinds of things. So pulling in your own story, pulling in stories of professional athletes or people they look up to. And then as long as you get like a couple people to buy in, like if you got a group of your team to buy in and they started to see changes, like everyone else is gonna be like, oh, maybe there is something to this whole visualizing thing, right? And like there's only so much you can do though. Like, let's say you do all those things and they still are just like, no, I don't want to do it. Then it's like, okay, well, that's your decision. Like, you can't force someone to do something. And so I think more importantly than like forcing it and pushing it is just allowing them to see how it's changing other people's performance in other people's life instead of just being like, do this, do this, do this. Just let it kind of come on their own. Otherwise, if it's forced, they're not really going to get much out of it, anyways.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I think the first point is my favorite. That one, it's hard to encourage people to do something that we think could be impactful or transformational if we haven't experienced it ourselves. And so I think that's really important that, it's just not going to mean a whole lot if you try to push it on them, but you haven't implemented it and seen the benefit of it in your own life. I think it's really powerful to start there. And then, like you said, too, to share, hey, here's someone that you aspire to be or look up to, or this person with a lot of credibility, they do it. Yeah, can definitely be a big selling point, especially for a young person. Oh, wow, this person does it. There's got to be something here. Like my coach isn't totally crazy if
You're
this
right.
person is doing it. I think it's a great point, because yeah, I think that's a challenge that I think a lot of coaches run into. Is like, well, sometimes you just get athletes that are resistant to it,
Mhm.
and yeah, I think you also made a good point around you wanna get a couple on board, and I would say to that point, you wanna get a couple influencers on board too,
Yeah.
because if there's a couple kids on board, but they're not really influencers among their peers, well, it's like, well, they're, whatever anyway. So and then you'll have the other kids on your team probably, like, revolt even more at that point. Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know.
totally.
Any thoughts to that or
Yeah,
experiences
no.
navigating that? I
Yeah,
just think the
I agree.
social and group dynamics can be really
Oh,
challenging when you try to do some of these things, and you've got to, yeah, try to navigate it wisely. I think it can be kinda
yeah.
tricky.
It is, especially with girls, the social dynamics can get like so complex, right? So you're right. Like, I think it's important. Like, let's say you have a group of captains or whatever influential players on your team, and maybe it's you as a coach bringing them aside and being like, "Hey, I know this works for you guys, or you guys have given this a shot. Like, I need your guys' help in getting everyone on board with this." Because most of the time, like if there's leaders that they trust, they're gonna listen more so to them than they will to the coach sometimes, like, it's just like that social dynamic of wanting to be liked and approved, by your peers, so I think that's a really good point that, like, trying to get the leaders on board first, otherwise, if they're not on board, then people are gonna look to them and be like, "Well, they're not doing it, why am I gonna do it?" Right? So, it starts at number 1 with you as a coach doing it, like, don't in my opinion, I would never, like tell my kids to do something that I'm not willing to do myself or that I'm not already doing myself. So number 1, it starts with you. Number 2, let's bring it down to the captains, to the leaders, get them on board, and then it kind of will just trickle through the whole team. So yeah, I think that's really important to kind of look at it with that hierarchy, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I wanna shift a little bit. I think it's connected to some of the things we've been talking about, but I wanna talk about how you did and or if you were to go back into coaching soccer, say full time, what are some things that you did or would do in your coaching to really help athletes build and embrace a growth mindset and build their confidence too? Like, how would you do that in your coaching, knowing what you know now?
I would, and I feel like I did this a little bit, but not quite enough, is like really celebrating the mistakes and them getting outside of their comfort zone, even if it goes horribly wrong, like celebrating that more so than celebrating a goal. Because with girls, especially, it's like I will do anything I can to not get yelled at by my coach or to not make a mistake or to not be laughed at by my peers and stuff like that. So the big thing with coaches that they can do, and I've had so many girls that I've worked with that a big reason why they're struggling with getting outside of their comfort zone and having a growth mindset is because their coaches like just don't accept mistakes, right? And so I think it's huge. And what I would have done is like anytime I see a player getting outside of their comfort zone or pushing themselves physically or mentally or whatever it is, like really taking it upon myself to give them kudos, and not just like a hey, good job, but like maybe pulling them aside and telling them good job and getting really, really specific with that feedback. Cause it's easy as a coach to just be like, hey, good job, like, give them a pat on the back. And that is great. Nothing wrong with that. But can you get real specific with that feedback? Right? Like, hey, I saw you trying to split the defender's hair. And I know usually that's something you don't do, but I'm super proud of you for trying it anyways. And then, give them whatever feedback. But just really, really praising the effort over like the result is something that I would have done even more so if I was coaching.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that's huge. Something I'm intentional about, and so many coaches that I've had the pleasure of talking to have said similar things, and a lot of them said that that was part of their evolution as a coach too, is that they had to make this shift, and they saw the fruit of it. I'd love to talk a little bit about coaching females specifically. I know that's a big part of what you do, working with female athletes, and I haven't coached females yet, and I'm not a female, so I I am not by any means an expert on this. So I'm excited to hear your thoughts and opinions. The first thing I want to talk about, and it was something that we kind of exchange thoughts around, is how can coaches help female athletes move past comparison and that fear of judgment. I think you kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier, but talk more about that. How do we actually help them move past that comparison and fear of judgment?
I mean, I think the first most obvious thing is don't compare them to other players on the team. Like that there's a difference between being competitive and competition and that kind of thing versus comparing. And this is a big one for parents too, right? Like comparing player A to player B and saying, "Hey, you need to be more like her. You need to play more like her." Like for a boy, that's going to work. They're going to be like, "Oh, I'm going to show him and I'm going to be better than him." That's going to work for a boy. But for most girls, not all girls, but for most girls, they're going to take any comparison as I'm not as good as her and I'm not what this coach wants me to be. So, really, really pay attention when you're coaching girls to not peg them against each other. Again, that works with boys, it doesn't work with girls. So, don't peg them against each other. Like, let them know that, like, just because someone else is good at this, like they don't have to be that thing. They can be their own thing and be their own unique player and their own unique individual and have their own unique strengths. So really it's like first not comparing them, but then also really empowering them to find their own strengths and their own uniqueness as a player and letting them know that you don't have to be everything. You just have to be really good at one thing. If you can just be really good at this one thing, then you're doing your job on this team. And then I think that helps with, the whole camaraderie of the team too. It's like there's a bunch of different cogs in the machine, right? Instead of everyone's trying to do everyone else's job, everyone has their one thing and they're really, really good at. And when you put it all together as a team, that's when the magic happens. So those are a few things as a coach you can do as it relates to comparison on the field.
Yeah, that's really good. I'd love if you just talked a little bit more about, um, yeah, coaching female athletes. I think what you just shared there is great. Like, what are the other important factors that we should be considering? And maybe you could even speak, because I was actually looking at this the other day. Like, the reality of it is still the majority of coaches are male. The
Yeah.
majority
Mhm.
of coaches coaching female sports are still male. Like, just more men are in coaching than women. It's
Yeah.
disproportionate for probably a lot of reasons. But maybe you could speak specifically to male coaches coaching females. Like,
Mhm.
what are the other things that they need to know and be aware of that maybe we're just ignorant of because we haven't had that lived experience and we don't understand what we don't understand?
Well, the first thing you already said it is just being aware. Like I think that's the where most coaches go wrong is they're not aware of like, hey, when I talk to my player this way, it's going to create this outcome. So just being really aware of like how you're speaking to your players. And with girls Girls are weird and they they like to read into things a little bit. So with boys, it's very direct. They take your words and they like literally take that in, right? But with girls, they tend to read into things. So if you tell them one thing, they may take that and come up with something completely different than what you mean just based on how you said it. So being aware of what you say, yes, is important, but also how you say it with girls, because they will read into that. So being aware of your tone, being aware of like when you say something, how do they actually react, right? Instead of just yelling it and then going off and doing something else, like can you say the thing, see how they react, and then make adjustments from there? Because coaching girls is hard. Like I don't expect every coach, especially every male coach, to say the right things all the time and to always understand what's going through their head. That's not possible. But just be more aware. Be more aware of how what you're saying and how you're saying it is affecting your girls, not only their performance, but also, when they leave the field, when they're in practice, when they come off the bench, when they get on the bench, like so many things like that. I think it all comes down to awareness.
That's great. I think that's good advice. And I think, again, the reality of coaching is that the answer is often it depends. And
Yeah.
like, every kid and situation, yeah, requires an awareness of it, or yeah, just an openness to it to be able to learn from it and recognize, we probably don't have all the answers here. I just had another question coming to my mind and kind of unrelated, but I'm sure that you experience and encounter it a lot in the athletes that you coach and or the teams that you work with. What do you do or how do you help players that are in a slump, quote unquote? Right? They're really struggling, that they feel like they're in this performance rut. How can as coaches can we help bring them out of that?
Well, right, a slump is, in my opinion, it's all mental, right? It's not like, oh, you lost your speed or your skills or whatever. So understanding that it's all mental. And when a player is in a slump, I would put yourself in their shoes, try to see it from their perspective. Most of the time when a player's in a slump, they're really hard on themselves. They're kind of in this like negative thought loop, this self-doubt, like they're really, really down on themselves. So the worst thing you can do is like judge them for it, shame them for it, say, what's wrong with you? Come on, you need to get out of this. It's more so like asking better questions, asking the right questions. Like it, and maybe this lump for a lot of kids, it doesn't have to do with the sport. Maybe there's something going on at home. So I think the most important thing is like just having a conversation with them. Like, hey, what's going on? Everything okay? Is there anything I can do to help you? Just like being there for them, not just as an athlete, but as a person, letting them know that like, hey, I know you're in a slump right now, but you're gonna get out of this. I'll help you, I'll support you get out of it. But right now, like just um like try not to push them out of it because that creates pressure, right? If you're trying to push them out of the slump and get them out of the slump, they feel pressure, especially girls. They feel pressure to get out of the slump. And when they feel pressure, a lot of the time, it's just going to dig them deeper and deeper and deeper into the slump. So letting them know, hey, it's okay. We all go through this. It's not like it's going to last forever. But then again, being there for them, asking them the right questions. Maybe they want to train a little extra with you. Maybe they just need someone to talk to. So that would be my answer for that.
Thanks for sharing that. I realized as I was looking through my notes that I've been taking during our conversation that I forgot to ask a question that I wanted to ask earlier. So I'm gonna circle back to it.
Mhm.
And you alluded to a little bit of the answer, but I'd love to know a little bit more about it. I mean, you talked earlier, I think you said that there was a massive shift for you between junior and senior year of college, or maybe sophomore and junior year, and performance really improved, your mental health really improved, and you said a big piece of that was visualization. I'd love to know more about that in terms of, yeah, what were some of the things that changed for you, kind of your journey of transformation um, as an athlete, and what that was like. What were the factors that played into it
Yeah.
and the results that came from it?
Yeah, so junior year was really tough when I got injured at the beginning of the year. I was starting before that, got injured, and then I lost my starting spot and I just couldn't get it back. I was totally stuck in victim mode. I was, blaming other people for my lack of playing time. I was just honestly, I was a horrible teammate in my opinion. I was not a good teammate. I was not being supportive. I was just focused on me and was really selfish. And I didn't get very much playing time. I didn't have fun. And then the summer between junior and senior year, I was like, all right, Shay, like you got 1 year left. Like, are you going to have the same year as last year or are you going to change it and actually take responsibility? So at that time we had kind of started working with a sports psychologist. He was working with our team a little bit, and then also I was taking sports psychology classes, and so I knew that a lot of my issues, I guess you could call them, weren't physically related. Like it wasn't like I was having, physical issues. It was more, I would say, all mental. And so I knew that if I wanted to change my season and actually have a good last year of my career, it needed to be a mental shift. And so I started taking the principles that I was learning. I started visualizing. I started, like actually being a good teammate no matter what the situation was, and like just taking self responsibility and accountability for my stuff. And so it was a mix of the visualizing, but then also just a mindset overall in general, that like this is your year, this isn't anybody else's job but your own. So I started visualizing before every game. I got voted team captain. I got my starting spot back, and I literally like it was a complete 180 from the previous year. Like I had the most fun I've ever had in my however many years that was, 18-year career. That was the most fun I've ever had playing soccer, was my senior year of college, and I attribute it to just those mental shifts and doing those different kind of mental strategies such as visualization. And that's why I'm so passionate about like talking about visualizing and just the mindset shifts, because I know how big of an impact it can have.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing that jumped out to me there was what you shared around, you just kind of had this realization and took ownership of your mindset and what you wanted to make of that year. And I'm sure that it wasn't as easy as that sounds, but
Right. Yeah.
yeah, that is a huge piece of it. And hopefully as coaches, we can help our athletes get to that place too, where they have these light bulb moments like, oh, okay. I realize like I need to make some changes here and I can control some of these things. And maybe, yeah, like you said, you realize, man, the thing's limiting right now. It's not my physical abilities and skills. It's my mindset. It's the way that I'm showing up. It's kind of teammate I'm being. I think it's really, really, yeah, powerful. Just you sharing your story of that. I've got three quick rapid fire questions for you before I get you out of here, Shay. The first one is this: the most fun part of coaching is,
Seeing the kids just have fun. Like it's so simple, but just seeing them come off the field, have fun, and learn.
yeah, yeah. I coached a practice last night and we ended, and one of the kids goes, "Is it over? Really?"
Yeah,
Yes,
that's
it
the
is,
best.
and I'm so glad you asked that. The next one is this: I wish I would have known blank before my first coaching experience.
That I don't have to know everything.
It's good. Amen to
Yeah.
that. And I know I'm successful as a coach when
I get invited to their weddings in 20 years.
sweet. Yeah,
When I can
that's so
have that
good.
relationship with them, way, way after they're done playing. It's all about the relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. Would totally agree with that. Well, Shay, this has been awesome. I know coaches will find it valuable. Before we wrap it up and get out of here, why don't you just share with them where they can connect with you and learn more about the work you do?
Yes, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Shay Haddow. My podcast is the Alpha Girl Confidence Podcast. And then you can find everything on my website at alphagirlconfidence.com.
Coaches, thanks for listening to this episode, and thanks to Shay for joining me. As always, if you enjoyed this episode and you want a copy of the free podcast notes, go to cuttingedgecoach.com/podcast or click the link in the show details. And don't forget to check out filmforcoaches.com to learn more or register for the upcoming online workshop I'm hosting with Doug Lemov. We're going to help coaches take their use of film to the next level. Spots are limited and it's almost full, so grab your spot today. That's filmforcoaches.com. Thanks for listening to the podcast.